My name is Elaine Mercer, and I never thought I'd be accused of ruining the very life I spent mine building. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate bitter reckoning. It started with a dinner I didn't even want to cook. Just a small thing. Leftover rotisserie chicken reheated in the oven with a little butter. Steamed broccoli, microwaved rice. Nothing special. But it was something warm. Something that felt like trying. I thought that might matter. It didn't. He sat across from me, elbows on the table, posture too casual to mean comfort. That's how I knew something was brewing. My son Adam always wore his tension like a scarf, quiet, wrapped around his neck, only visible if you looked closely. He pushed his fork around the plate, didn't say much, and then he looked up, not slowly, not dramatically, just directly. Eyes flat, voice dry. You know my life's kind of a disaster, and I think it's mostly your fault. I didn't even blink. I wish I could say I gasped, or felt some cinematic sting. But no, I just sat there, suddenly very aware of the hum of the refrigerator and the clink of his fork as he set it down. At first I smiled. You're joking. He wasn't. He leaned back like he'd rehearsed this moment. Maybe he had. You think I'm joking? There wasn't rage in his voice. That would have been easier. Rage I could meet with my own. But this was worse. This was certainty. I'm not saying everything he clarified, but the foundation? Yeah, you built it wrong. Emotionally. That's where the cracks are. He said it like he was describing an architectural flaw, as if I were some crooked contractor he'd hired as a child. I think I laughed then. Not because it was funny, because I didn't know what else to do. You're serious. Dead serious. He folded his hands. You made me scared of love. You made me think achievement was the only way to be worthy. You never apologized for being cold. I closed my eyes. He had no idea. No idea what I'd bled to give him that life he now called a disaster. But this wasn't the time for defense. That never works. He wasn't on trial. I wasn't on trial. Not yet, at least. You think I was cold? I said, trying to keep my voice level. Okay. Do you want to talk about that? Really talk. He shrugged. Do you? And in that moment, I knew this wasn't about the dinner. Or a single moment. It was about years. Long, slow years where love looked more like lists and rules than hugs and praise. You remember the night I missed your senior play? I asked. His face hardened. You mean one of the nights you weren't there? I nodded slowly. Yeah. That one. I waited. I checked every 5 minutes. Everyone else's mom was in the audience, I know. You promised Mom. I know. I looked down at my hands, cracked at the knuckles dry from work sanitizer. I was in the ER that night, holding a little boy's hand while they tried to bring him back. I was the only one who spoke his language. His mom wasn't there. She couldn't get across the city in time. Okay, Adam said. So he needed you more. No, I said quietly. You did. Silence. Not cruel. Just heavy. Like we both understood something neither of us wanted to admit. We were both telling the truth. And it still wasn't enough. You never made room for me to be a mess, he said after a minute. What do you mean you were always tired? Or working? Or stoic? You never cried in front of me. Never admitted you were scared. So when I was scared, I thought I had to fake it. Be perfect. Perform or be invisible. I swallowed hard. I thought I was protecting you, I whispered. I thought being strong all the time was how you'd feel safe. He shook his head. Maybe I would have felt safer if you'd just let me see you break, Mom. I wasn't ready for that. Because the truth is, I did break. A lot. But never in front of him. I waited until the shower was running, until the house was dark, until he was at school, and I could curl up in the laundry room and cry into a warm towel straight out of the dryer so the fabric would muffle the sound. He never saw those moments, so in his mind I must have looked like a machine, a cold, exhausted machine. He took a bite of broccoli, chewed, swallowed. I'm not saying you didn't work hard, I'm saying you didn't love loud. And I needed loud. The simplicity of that sentence shattered something in me. You didn't love loud. I loved constantly. I loved with late shifts. I loved with food in the fridge and lights that stayed on, and a birthday gift even when I skipped meals to afford it. But he was right. I didn't love loud. I loved in whispers, in endurance. And kids don't always understand that kind of language. Do you hate me? I asked. He paused. No, but I think I resent you. Fair. Brutal. But fair. Okay, I said. Then let me ask something else. Can you listen? He hesitated. Can you let me tell you what you never saw? Not to defend myself. Just so you know. So if you're going to hate me, you're hating the whole picture. He sat back. All right. I'll listen. I looked at him, really looked. His jaw looked just like his father's. So did his defensiveness. But his eyes? His eyes were mine. And they weren't angry anymore. Just confused. Wounded. Then here's where I'll start, I said. I gave you everything I had. Even when it cost me pieces of myself I'll never get back. I took a breath. And maybe you'll never forgive me. But I'm going to tell the story anyway. And so it began. One mother, one son, one table set with truth. A dinner turned reckoning. And maybe, just maybe, the start of something finally real between us. You don't become the villain in someone's story overnight. It happens quietly, drip by drip, the same way rain carves valleys through stone over centuries. You don't see it at first. But one day you look up and realize something that used to be close has become unreachable. That's how it was with Adam. I didn't wake up and decide to become the enemy. I woke up exhausted, tired from 3 night shifts in a row, from juggling groceries, bills, late fees, and a body that ached in places I no longer had names for. But he didn't see that. He saw a woman who forgot to ask how his test went, who didn't notice when he started skipping breakfast, who flinched when he tried to hug her because her back was sore from bending over other people's hospital beds. He saw neglect. I saw survival. But survival has a cost. And I was cashing it in with interest. The first moment I truly felt the shift was small. So small it almost escaped me. Adam was 12. We were at the mall. I told him he could pick out 1 shirt and he asked for 2. I said no. He begged. I said no again. And he said under his breath, but loud enough Dad would have said yes. That stopped me in my tracks. Not because of the comparison, but because he'd stopped calling him Dad months ago. Usually just him. I stared at Adam. He stared back. No apology. Just truth, cold, sharp 12-year-old truth. I didn't say anything then. But when we got home, I cried in the laundry room. Again. There's something about crying next to a dryer, the heat, the hum that makes the sadness feel both louder and more acceptable. That day, I whispered into a towel. When did I become the one he resents? I didn't have an answer. But I started keeping score after that. Watching for signs. High school made it worse. He got taller, angrier. He started slamming doors, wearing hoodies in 90-degree weather, coming home late, with I was at Marcus's house as a shield I couldn't penetrate. Once I tried to sit him down, make his favorite spaghetti, light a candle. Just talk. He ate in silence, then stood and said, "You're doing that thing again where you pretend we're fine." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to me in weeks. I wanted to shout back. You think I like pretending? You think I don't feel the tension every second I walk in the house? But instead, I just nodded. I'm sorry. I said. That was my default apologies that didn't always reach their destination. There was a moment I can still picture it. He was 16. I was late picking him up from school. Work had run over and my phone had died. He stood outside the gates in the cold arms crossed. When I pulled up, he got in the car and didn't speak. Not a single word on the ride home. Until we pulled into the driveway and he finally muttered, "You forget me a lot." I wanted to say, "I never forget you. I just forget myself trying to keep up." But I didn't. Because I knew to him time was memory, and a cold 30 minutes on a school bench would stain longer than any of my exhausted explanations. I began to recognize something I once read in a book, that we all become villains in stories that aren't ours. Adam's story was his own, and somewhere in his mind I had stopped being the protagonist. Maybe I never was. Maybe I was just a background character who showed up with sandwiches and forgot the right words. You know what hurts more than being hated? Being misunderstood. Being looked at like a stranger inside your own home. That's what happened after his 18th birthday. He didn't yell, didn't act out. He just started treating me like a roommate he barely tolerated. Dinners became microwave beeps. Conversations shrank to fine, cool, and whatever. His eyes were like locked doors I no longer had keys to. Once I tried to show him an old scrapbook, the one with his baby pictures, footprints cards from his first birthday. He flipped a few pages, then said, "Was this for you or me?" And I said, "What?" He clarified. "Did you make this so you could feel like a good mom or so I could remember you were one I didn't answer? Because the truth? Maybe it was both." When he left for college, I hugged him. He didn't hug back. Not really. Just leaned in like someone trying to get through a metal detector with as little contact as possible. And that was the last time I saw him for 8 months. No calls, no texts, just occasional seen messages. I sent care packages. They went unopened. And I began to realize I wasn't just his mother. I had become the ghost of his grievances. But even ghosts feel things. I'd sit at the kitchen table looking at old drawings, report cards, and Mother's Day cards he made when he was little. One read, "Mommy, you are the best cooker, hugger, and hero." I folded that one and placed it in my wallet. Just to remember that at one point I wasn't his villain, I was his everything. So when he finally came home that evening for dinner, the one where he looked me in the eye and said, "My life is a mess because of you," I wasn't surprised. I was already wearing the costume he'd stitched together for me in his head. But that doesn't mean I didn't hurt. Because the cruelest kind of pain is hearing a version of yourself that doesn't match the one you tried to be. People think motherhood is unconditional love, but sometimes motherhood is conditional grace. It's waking up every day to face someone who blames you and still making sure they're fed warm and safe. Even when you are none of those things yourself. I never meant to become his villain. I meant to become his shield, his foundation, his unwavering support. But what I became in his eyes was a wall he had to climb over just to breathe. So now I face a truth more brutal than any accusation. If he sees me as the villain, I can't change the ending of his story. But maybe, just maybe, I can offer him the prequel. I can tell him the parts he missed, the sleepless nights, the panic attacks in the bathroom, the times I stood in line at food banks with his baby shoes stuffed in my coat pocket just to keep them warm. If I am the villain in his version, then I will at least tell mine. Not to shift the blame, but to share the burden. There's a moment every mother has, when the cape falls off. Not with a crash or a scream or some grand meltdown in the grocery aisle. No, it happens quietly. For me, it was a Tuesday. Adam was 13. I had worked a double shift the night before, hadn't slept more than 3 hours. The hospital was short-staffed, the air outside was bitter and gray, and I had just gotten home to find the water heater broken again. Still in my scrubs, I peeled off my shoes and walked into the kitchen. He was sitting there, backpack slung halfway off, cereal bowl half full, scrolling through his phone with a look I'd come to recognize detached disapproval. Hey, I mumbled, pouring myself a glass of tap water still cold from the busted heater. No answer. I leaned against the sink. Rough day. He didn't look up. Whatever. Then he said it. 4 words. Nothing sharp, just flat. You look really old. That was it. No punch. No dramatic insult. Just the truth from a kid who didn't mean to gut me but did. Because up until that moment I'd believed I could still fake it. Still wear the armor. Still hold my head high, exhausted but strong. But in that instant I saw it. He didn't see a hero anymore. He saw a woman who was falling apart. That night I stood in the bathroom mirror. Lines under my eyes. Hair tied in a knot, streaks of gray catching the light. I looked like someone who'd been trying too hard for too long with too little return. And then I heard myself say out loud, softly, "You can stop now. Not give up. Just stop pretending I was invincible." That was the day I stopped being Superwoman. And the truth is, I had never been her to begin with. I started noticing other things after that. The way I always answered, "I'm fine," before anyone finished asking. The way I carried grocery bags like trophies, refusing help even when my shoulders ached. The way I hadn't cried in front of Adam in over a decade, thinking I was doing him a favor by staying strong. But all it did was teach him that emotions were weakness, that showing pain was unacceptable, that love was measured in labor, not in presence. So one evening, not long after I tried something different, I sat on the couch and cried openly. I didn't hide in the bathroom. I didn't wait until he left the house. He walked in and froze. His face twitched with confusion, then concern. "Mom." I wiped my cheeks. "Yeah. What's wrong?" "I'm tired," I said. "And lonely. And I feel like no matter what I do, I'm failing at all of it." He didn't speak for a long time. Then he sat beside me, hesitant, and whispered, "You don't have to do everything alone." It wasn't a fix. It didn't rewrite our history. But it was a crack of sunlight through a long, long storm. Still, I didn't stop working 2 jobs, didn't stop answering emails at midnight or skipping meals to make sure he had lunch money, but I stopped hiding my cracks. And oddly enough, that's when he started talking more, as if vulnerability gave him permission to feel again. Years later, he'd say, "That was the first time I saw you as a person. Not a machine, not a rule book, not a cape-wearing savior, just Elaine, the woman behind the motherhood." But that shift came too late to change some of the deeper scars, the ones he carried quietly. So when he finally sat at that dinner table and told me I'd ruined his emotional foundation, that he'd built his adulthood on sand, I wasn't shocked. Because part of me had been expecting that bill to come due. And honestly, he deserved to send it. Because I had tried to be everything. And in trying to be everything, I forgot to simply be with him. Present. Honest. Human. So no, I wasn't Superwoman anymore. But I was finally something else real. And sometimes real is the only thing that can start to rebuild what's been broken. You think you know a house because you've lived in it. Because your feet memorized every creaky board, because you can walk to the kitchen in total darkness and never bump your shin. But you don't really know a house until you leave it for a while, until you return years later and it looks at you like a stranger. That's how I felt the morning after Adam told me I'd failed him. The walls didn't echo. They accused. And every room held something I'd forgotten or deliberately buried. I started in the hallway, a narrow stretch of floor where Adam used to run up and down in his socks, sliding until he crashed into the end wall, giggling like the world was his. That wall had a dent in it, still there after all these years. I remember staring at it once and thinking I'd get it patched. I never did. And now it felt like the house had kept the wound on purpose, a reminder that even joy leaves a mark. The living room came next. The couch was new, the photos dusted, the rug replaced. but it still felt like that room, where we spent our Sunday mornings with cartoons and cereal, where he said his first full sentence, "I do it, Mommy," where we had his 6th birthday party and he refused to blow out the candles until his teddy bear was watching, and also where he sat stone-faced at 17 and told me, "I don't feel like I live here. I feel like I'm just visiting." I'd brushed it off, then told him every teen feels like that. But now it came back with a different tone. Not rebellion, not moodiness, disconnection. In the corner stood the bookshelf, still half filled with dusty paperbacks I hadn't touched in years. Tucked beside them was something thin and worn. I pulled it out. A photo album. Not digital, not scanned. Just old real photographs. Taped. Scribbled on. Some faded with time. There he was, baby Adam. Gap-toothed, overjoyed in a superhero costume. Eating watermelon in the backyard, face sticky and wild, wrapped in a blanket on my chest during his first fever. Each image hit me like a small punch, not because I forgot them, but because I remembered how quickly they passed, how one moment he was chasing bugs in the yard, and the next accusing me of not seeing him at all. I closed the album, walked into the kitchen. That room had seen the best and worst of us, the smell of cinnamon from Saturday pancakes, burnt popcorn from late-night study sessions, dinners made in silence after another argument. I remembered once when he was 10, he stood on a stool and cooked scrambled eggs with me. He'd asked, "Are we poor?" And I'd lied. I said, "No, we just save money differently." He nodded. But he knew. I could see it in the way he gave me half his allowance that week. We raised each other in this house, and maybe that was the root of the problem. I gave him everything I had, but I was learning as I went. There was no manual, no backup parent. Just me and this structure of wood wires and decades of inherited silence. I moved upstairs into his old bedroom. The door still had the sticker that read, "Keep out," in shaky handwriting. I pushed it open slowly, like I was stepping into a church where a child once prayed to be understood. Everything was smaller than I remembered. The twin bed, the sagging desk, posters curling off the wall, a small mirror with a crack down one side, and then tucked beneath the bed, a box. Old, taped, forgotten. Inside sketches, torn notebook pages, a sock puppet from first grade, and a folded sheet of wide-ruled paper titled 10 Things I Wish My Mom Knew. My breath stopped. I sat on his bed, carefully unfolding the letter. It was written in green pen, uneven lines. 1. I get scared when I hear you crying at night. 2. I feel bad when you miss my games for work. 3. I try to be brave, but sometimes I don't know how. 4. I don't hate you when I'm mad. 5. I pretend I don't care so you won't worry. 6. Sometimes I think you'd be happier if I wasn't here. 7. I keep secrets because I don't want to disappoint you. 8. I wish we laughed like we used to. 9. I don't want you to be perfect. Just here. 10. I love you, even when it doesn't look like it. I read it once. Then again. Each line heavier than the last. This letter was never meant to be found, and that made it sacred. He'd written it years ago, and I realized with horror we'd probably been in the same house when he did. I might have been in the kitchen scrubbing dishes or paying bills. He might have written that note in a surge of confusion and courage, and then hidden it because he didn't think I'd have time to read it. That's the danger of loving silently. It teaches those around you that silence is the only safe language. I didn't leave the room for a long while. The sun dipped. The light turned amber. And I just sat there, surrounded by the ghosts of a boy I thought I knew better than anyone. It's strange, isn't it? To raise a human being, to feed them, clothe them, shelter them, and still not fully know the storm happening inside their chest. That night I couldn't sleep, so I wandered again. Into the garage, the backyard, even the laundry room. That cramped, steamy little corner of the house had always been my confession booth, where I'd sob quietly into towels, where I'd fold and refold laundry just to feel some sense of control, where I once muttered through gritted teeth, "I'm trying. God, I'm trying. Why isn't it enough?" Now I looked around and asked the air, what more could I have done? No answer came, but a different voice whispered in my memory atoms. You filled a role you didn't want. And maybe for a while that was true. I hadn't planned to raise him alone, hadn't chosen all the sacrifices, hadn't wanted to be the one who had to smile through missed recitals and denied field trips and Christmases paid for with credit cards. But I had wanted him, every single second of him. That part had never changed. Maybe he didn't see it then. Maybe he still doesn't. But that doesn't make it untrue. I went back to bed, laid awake until the first blue light of dawn, and I made a vow not to defend myself, not to rewrite our past, but to speak the truths I never dared to. Because if this house had taught me anything, it's that walls keep secrets. But sometimes you need to knock them down to build anything worth living in. There's a drawer in my house I never open. It's not locked, but I might as well have sealed it with grief. It sits beneath the microwave nestled between expired coupons and appliance manuals I never read. And somewhere beneath the hum of the fridge and the dust of years, it holds the one thing I never meant for anyone to see. A letter. Folded. Yellowed. Unsent. A letter I wrote to Adam 5 years ago during one of the longest winters of my life, and if I'm honest, I didn't write it to give to him. I wrote it because I was afraid that if I didn't, I'd forget who I was trying to be. It had been a cold December then, the kind of bitter gray season that hangs like guilt in the air. Adam had just turned 21 home from college, but distant more shadow than sun. He barely spoke, kept his earbuds in, disappeared behind the blue glow of a laptop screen that had become more familiar to him than my face. I didn't know how to reach him anymore, and the silence between us grew so loud it started ringing in my ears. The night I wrote the letter was uneventful on the surface. Adam had left a bowl of cereal and an open carton of milk on the kitchen counter at 11 p.m. I walked in still in my work scrubs, exhausted and cold to the bone. I told him to clean up. He didn't even turn around. Just muttered, "Why are you always on my back?" My chest tightened. I wanted to say, "Because you matter. Because I love you too much to ignore you. Because I raised you alone, and I'm scared you're drifting too far away." But instead I snapped. Because if I didn't care, I wouldn't say anything at all. He walked away, and I stood there staring at that milk pooling on the countertop. Somewhere inside, something cracked. I poured myself a glass of wine I couldn't afford, sat at the kitchen table under the flickering overhead bulb, and pulled out the nearest piece of lined paper. And I wrote, "Dear Adam, I don't know who you are right now. I see you every day, but you feel like a stranger living in my home. I'm trying to remind myself that you're not a boy anymore, that silence doesn't mean distance, that moodiness doesn't mean resentment. But I'm also trying not to let the space between us become a graveyard, because I miss you. I miss your dumb jokes, your humming while doing dishes. I even miss how you used to ask, 'What's for dinner?' The second you got home like the world owed you warmth and a full plate. I miss being the person you trusted. I know I'm not perfect. I overworry. I overtalk. I ask questions you don't want to answer. But I raised you with my whole heart. I gave you every soft part of me and tried to hide the broken ones. You're the best thing I've ever done, Adam. And it hurts to feel like I'm losing you just as I'm starting to need you. Love always, Mom." I folded it, put it in an envelope, wrote his name on the front, and never gave it to him. I couldn't. I was afraid he'd roll his eyes, call it emotional manipulation, or worse, ignore it completely. So I tucked it into that drawer and pretended it didn't exist. But letters have a pulse, you know. Even hidden they beat. They wait. And 5 years later, that letter was still waiting. The night after I found Adam's childhood poem, 10 Things I Wish My Mom Knew I Couldn't Sleep. My chest felt too tight. My hands kept shaking. So I crept down to the kitchen and opened the drawer. It was still there, softened at the corners, ink slightly faded. I read it once and I cried for the woman who wrote it. Not just because she was hurting, but because she still hoped. The next morning, I slid the letter into a clean envelope and drove it to his apartment. I didn't call, didn't ring the doorbell. I just placed it beneath his door and walked away before fear could talk me out of it. That evening, I got a text. Found your letter. My heart clenched. I stared at the phone, waiting. A few minutes later, did you really mean all of it? I typed without hesitating. Yes. Every word. Then and now. And then he sent a third message. One I hadn't expected. I have a drawer like that too. I paused. Reread it. What do you mean? I asked. A drawer full of things I wrote to you, but never said. Thought you wouldn't care. Or worse, that you'd think I was blaming you. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence sit. Because in that moment I realized something important. We were both afraid of being misunderstood, but fear had built the silence, not hate. The next day he called. His voice was different. Not apologetic, not emotional, just real, grounded, strained but open. Mom, he said, can we talk sometime? Not about the past, just about now. I swallowed the lump in my throat and said yes. I'd like that. And it wasn't fireworks. It wasn't healing music swelling in the background, but it was enough. A breath where there had once been a chokehold. I don't know if he kept my letter. I don't know if he ever read it again. But I know this. Sometimes the words you think will be rejected are the ones that actually reach them. Sometimes saying the thing out loud is the only way to stop it from rotting inside you. Letters don't have to be delivered to matter, but some of them deserve daylight. Because silence isn't always noble. It's often just fear wearing a nice dress. And if you've written one, if there's a letter sitting somewhere in your drawer, your glove box, your phone's notes app, read it again. Decide if it's time. Because the worst thing a letter can do is never be read by the person who needs it most. It started with a ring I didn't recognize, not the usual shrill burst. This one felt softer, hesitant, as if the sound itself wasn't sure it had the right to be heard. I glanced at the screen at him. My thumb hovered above the green circle, and for a moment I was 10 seconds away from silence. I didn't know what version of him I'd hear on the other end, the boy I raised, or the man who said I ruined him. But I picked up anyway. Hi, I said, voice too thin. You okay? For 2 seconds there was just air. Then he exhaled. Not a sigh. Not a groan. More like someone letting go of something they'd held too long. Yeah, I think so. I don't know actually. That's how it started. For a while we just talked logistics, the weather, his work, nothing that mattered and everything that mattered. Until he cleared his throat and asked, "Why didn't you give me the letter back then?" My heart dropped. I was scared, I admitted. Scared it would make things worse. That you'd see it as guilt-tripping or too late to matter. He didn't answer right away. But when he did, it wasn't angry. It wasn't distant. I think I needed it more than I wanted to admit. I sat down on the edge of the couch holding the phone like it was breakable. You always seemed like you didn't want me in your head, I said quietly. I figured if I gave you space, maybe you'd eventually come back on your own. I was trying to come back, he said. But it felt like every time I reached for something, you'd already backed away. That cracked something open. You're not wrong, I whispered. There were days when I was so tired, Adam. So tired of guessing how to talk to you. I kept thinking I had to wait until you wanted me again. I always wanted you, he said almost defensively. Even when I was angry. even when you told me I ruined your life, especially then. There it was. Not an apology, not an excuse, a confession that his blame was a mask, a clumsy protection against something more fragile: fear, guilt, maybe grief. He told me about the year after college when everything collapsed. I couldn't hold a job for more than 6 months, he said. I kept comparing myself to other people my age, friends buying houses, getting married. Meanwhile, I was eating instant noodles and lying about interviews I never got. I didn't know, I said. I didn't want you to. Why not? Because I figured you'd see it as proof. Proof of what? That you failed. That hit harder than I expected. He continued. If I showed you I was falling apart, I thought you'd blame yourself for raising me wrong, for being too soft, or too hard, or too distant, or too poor. I didn't respond for a moment. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. I already blame myself, Adam, I said quietly. Every day. There was silence again. Then he asked, did Grandma blame herself for you? I flinched. It was the first time he brought up my mother since her funeral, and the first time I realized he saw more than I gave him credit for. No, I said slowly. But I wish she had. I wish she'd admitted she'd gotten things wrong. Did she? She did, I replied. But she never said it. And I carried that silence like an inheritance. He paused. I don't want us to become that. And that's when I felt it. Not a crack, not a collapse, but the first hinge turning on a sealed door. We talked for 2 hours. About the night he ran away at 16. About the job he lied about losing. About the girl he dated who said he had mother issues, and how that made him realize he hadn't dealt with anything at all. He asked me what it felt like to be alone in that house. I told him the truth. Some nights I sat on your bed just to feel like you were still real. He didn't speak for a long time after that. I used to dream of you finding me, he whispered. Showing up at some party or some bus station, hugging me in front of people just so I'd know I mattered. I closed my eyes. Let that sink in. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't think you needed me. Adam, I always needed you. We laughed through the tears, sometimes at ourselves. He told me about the time he almost called me from a gas station in Arizona but chickened out. How he kept my number in his phone under emergency use only. How sometimes he'd start writing me texts and delete them before sending. I didn't want to bother you, he said. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was tragic. Bother me, I said. I would have jumped in a car at 3 a.m. if I thought you wanted soup. By the end of the call, we were both quiet, not because we'd run out of things to say, but because we'd finally said enough. For now. Before he hung up, he said, "Thanks for writing the letter, even if it was late." And I replied, "Thanks for calling, even if it was 5 years too late." He laughed. Let's make late still count. And somehow that felt like the most beautiful kind of beginning. Not everything has to be fixed right away. Sometimes all you need is one night, one call, one opening. To say I'm still here, and I still want you in my life. There are questions you never ask until you're too old to hear the answers. And there are truths a mother carries to her grave, thinking silence is protection. I didn't truly start understanding my own mother until I began seeing myself in her mirror, hair thinning, back aching, voice worn raw from years of asking and not being heard. When Adam and I spoke that night, something cracked open. Not just between us, but inside me. I kept thinking, maybe the reason I failed to reach him for so long is because no one ever taught me how to be reached. And that goes back to her. My mother. Her name was Lucille, but people called her Lucky Lucy, which was funny because she was anything but. She grew up in a Depression-era house with 6 siblings and 1 bathroom. Her hands were always red from bleach, her knuckles cracked from winters she never warmed up from. She never said "I love you" outright, but she showed it in rations, packed lunches, ironed school uniforms, folded towels. When I was 9, I asked her why she never smiled in old photos. She said smiling doesn't get you fed. At the time, I thought that was just her being cold. Now I realize it was survival. Lucille didn't talk about feelings. She talked about tasks. Get the oil changed. Pay the light bill. Check the damn meat before you freeze it. She never taught me how to share my emotions, only how to survive them. Which meant when it came to raising Adam, I didn't come equipped with the right tools, just a toolbox full of rusted silence and buried resentment. I remember once when Adam was little, maybe 7 or 8, he came home from school sobbing because someone had made fun of his thrift store sneakers. I held him and told him it was okay that kids were just mean. Later that night, I called my mother. I thought maybe just this once she'd have insight. Instead, she said, "Tell him to toughen up. He'll have worse days than that." That was her version of comfort. I don't blame her. She grew up with even less softness than she gave me, but somewhere between her silence and my overthinking, I became a woman who confused emotional distance with discipline. After that phone call with Adam, I went digging through old boxes. Not his, this time mine. And I found something I hadn't seen in years, a journal I started when I was pregnant. Inside, between medical appointments and baby name ideas, there was a letter I'd written to myself. Dear Elaine, you're about to become someone's entire world. And I know you're scared. You don't have a blueprint. You're going to make mistakes. But don't turn into your mother. Don't swallow your hurt just to seem strong. Don't pretend silence is love. Let him see you cry. Let him hear you say, "I'm sorry." Let him feel wanted. Because one day he'll grow up. And if you're not careful, he'll carry your silence into his own life. Please God, don't let him become a man who thinks he has to earn tenderness. I closed the journal and sobbed until I couldn't feel my ribs, because I had failed myself. And I had become more like Lucille than I ever wanted to admit. That's the thing they don't tell you about generational wounds. They don't scream. They whisper. They echo in what you don't say. A few days later, I called Adam again. "Hey, I said I want to tell you something about my mom." "Lucille?" he asked. "Yeah. The woman who made burnt toast and expected praise for it." He laughed. "What about her? I think I understand her more now. But I also understand what she cost me, and what I might have cost you because of it." He was quiet for a second. "Are we doing trauma bonding now?" he joked. I laughed through my nose. "No, I'm doing truth-telling. About the things I never understood enough to say out loud." That conversation lasted an hour. We talked about how parenting is mostly improvisation, how generational silence isn't just a family pattern, it's a prison, and how maybe, just maybe, the only way to break the cycle is to name it, to say, "This is where it started. This is where it ends." Later that night, Adam texted me, "I think I want to write her a letter, even if she'll never read it." I asked, "What would you say?" His answer, I'd tell her, "I wish she'd let you be soft. And I'm trying to let you now." That was the moment I realized something beautiful. Healing doesn't always begin with an apology. Sometimes it begins with permission. Permission to be flawed, to rewrite your own inheritance, to finally tell the truth about the people who shaped you. Lucille never told me how to love with words, but maybe Adam and I could teach each other. And maybe that was the greatest revenge against the silence she left behind. I wasn't expecting a knock on my door that morning. The sun hadn't fully climbed yet, and the house still smelled like yesterday's coffee. At first, I thought it was the mailman or maybe the neighbor's kid needing help with his bike chain again. But when I opened it, Adam. He stood there, hands in his coat pockets, chin lowered like he was waiting for me to slam the door. Instead, I just stared. He looked older, not in years but in soul, like someone who'd seen the inside of their own mind and didn't entirely enjoy the tour. I know I should have called first. he said. You kind of did, I replied softly. Last week. He gave me a smile so fragile it could have cracked under its own weight. Then he said, I need to tell you something, but I didn't want to do it over the phone. I let him in. The house hadn't changed much, and maybe that was the point. Same coat rack, same framed photo of him at age 10 with chocolate on his face. Same kitchen clock that had been wrong for 5 years. I made coffee. He didn't ask for sugar. I didn't offer. We sat. He looked at the mug in front of him like it held answers. Then he said it. I almost didn't make it. My stomach turned. He didn't have to clarify. I knew exactly what it meant. It was 2 years ago, he continued. I had lost my job. I was sleeping in my car. I was drinking too much. I felt like I was screaming into a void no one heard. He paused, his hands trembling slightly around the ceramic. There was one night, parked near a gas station outside Reno. I wrote a goodbye note on the back of a receipt. I was going to go to sleep and never wake up. I couldn't breathe. But then he said, eyes glistening, I remembered something. I waited. I remembered your laugh. The one you did when we watched old cartoons and you tried not to find them funny. And I thought, if I disappear, no one will ever laugh like that again. And I realized I wanted to hear it one more time. He swallowed hard. So I drove away from that gas station, and I deleted the note. I reached across the table and took his hand. It felt like holding a lifeline, like I was touching proof that miracles don't always come loud and shining. Sometimes they show up quietly, covered in dust, looking like your grown son at your kitchen table. I didn't tell you then, he said, because I was ashamed, and because I didn't want to hurt you. You wouldn't have hurt me, I replied. You would have saved me from thinking you just didn't care anymore. We sat there in the silence that followed, not uncomfortable, but sacred. Then I asked, what kept you going after that night? He looked up at me. You, he said. Even when I hated you, I never stopped loving you. And I finally realized that maybe the pain I carried wasn't just mine. Maybe it was yours too. That was the moment something shifted. For years, we had both believed that love had to be earned, that survival meant silence, that being vulnerable meant being weak. But now, with tears on his cheeks and my hands around his, I realized this was love. Raw, ugly, honest. Love that knew everything and still stayed. He stayed the whole day. We made lunch together. He helped me fix the porch light I kept forgetting to change. We even watched an old cartoon just for the hell of it. And when he laughed at a joke from a pink rabbit, I laughed too. Not because it was funny, but because I still could. That night before he left, he hugged me longer than he ever had before. Then he whispered, I'm not done healing. But I want to do it with you, I whispered back. Then let's do it together. And I knew right then and there. Whatever came next, we were no longer alone in it. Adam was sitting on the porch swing legs, stretched out, a mug of lukewarm tea in hand. The late afternoon sun brushed against his face, softening the tiredness under his eyes. He looked peaceful, more at home than he had in years, and that's exactly why I knew it was time. I opened the screen door and stepped outside. He looked up. Hey. Hey, I replied, settling next to him. Silence swirled between us for a moment, the kind that means something's coming. And then I said it. There's something I need to tell you. About your father. He stilled. Completely. It was the kind of stillness people mistake for calm. But I knew better. I could see the storm beginning behind his eyes. I thought we didn't talk about him, Adam said finally, eyes still fixed on the horizon. We didn't, I said. And that was a mistake. He looked at me now fully. Why now? Because you deserve the truth. Even if it's late. Especially if it's late. He nodded once. Okay. His father's name was Malcolm, and Adam only knew fragments. A photo in a cracked frame, a box of old shirts in the attic, one birthday card he received when he was 6 and never another. He used to ask about him all the time as a child. Where's Daddy? Why doesn't he live with us? Does he still love me? And I'd always answer with deflections. Daddy had to go. Daddy's not very good at staying. Or sometimes I'd lie outright. Daddy's working somewhere far away. But the truth was uglier. Much uglier. I met Malcolm when I was 20, I said, slowly staring at the space between us. I was working as a nurse's aide at a rehab clinic. He came in for a sprained wrist and left with my number. Adam didn't interrupt. Back then, he was magnetic. You couldn't look away. He could make you feel like the only person in the room. But underneath that charm, there was chaos. I paused, remembering the apartment with no curtains and too many empty bottles. He was brilliant, I continued. He could read 3 books in a weekend, debate anyone under the sun, but he couldn't keep a job, or a promise, or his temper. Adam's grip on the mug tightened slightly. He wasn't cruel all the time, I said, but when he was, it was like ice, cutting. I thought I could fix him. I thought love was enough. I turned toward Adam, and then I got pregnant. He blinked. Did he know? Oh, he knew. And for a while he was good. Scared, but good. He held my hand at appointments. He picked out your name. A beat. And then, one day, he just didn't come home. Adam exhaled. Did he ever come back? I nodded. Twice. Twice. The first time when you were a baby. He held you once. You cried the whole time. And the second when you were 5. He showed up drunk, yelled about how I'd ruined his life. You were in the other room. I packed his bag while he was still shouting. Adam went quiet. I didn't tell you, I said, because I didn't want you to feel unwanted. But I felt that anyway, he whispered. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. I know. I was trying to protect you from a man who didn't know how to stay. But in doing that, I made it worse. I made you feel like there was something wrong with you. Like you were too much for him. Adam looked away, then back. Why didn't you ever just say he left? Because I didn't want you to blame him and carry that rage. And I didn't want you to blame me either. He set the mug down. His voice was tight now. I needed to know he was human, not a ghost, not some invisible hole I had to fill. I nodded slowly. And I'm sorry for not giving you that. We sat there while the sky turned orange and gold. He finally broke the silence. So where is he now? I don't know, I said honestly. The last I heard, he was in Portland. That was years ago. Would you want to find him? I shook my head. No, I made peace with his absence. But if you want to, I'd support that. Adam leaned back, thinking. I don't know if I want to find him, he said. But I think I want to stop running from the idea of him. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the start of clarity. And maybe that was enough. Before we went inside, Adam turned to me and said, Thank you for telling me. I know it wasn't easy. And I replied, No, but lies are heavier than truth. And I'm tired of carrying weight that doesn't belong to me. That night, I pulled out the only photo I had of Malcolm holding Adam. It was faded and worn. But Adam took it gently, held it for a long time, then folded it into his wallet. Not as a symbol of closure, but as evidence that this story was finally being told by the only person who could tell it right. It started with a question from my sister. Why don't you and Adam come to the reunion this year? I had laughed when I first saw the text. Family reunions hadn't exactly been our thing, especially not since Adam started avoiding anything that reminded him of shared blood and old resentments. But this year, after everything, I asked him. To my surprise, he said, Maybe it's time. The reunion was set at a rented house by the lake, one of those wide-porched multi-bedroom places that could hold 20 people, and 20 years of grudges all under one roof. We arrived together. Not perfectly mended, but together. And that was something new. The moment we stepped through the door, the noise hit us. Laughter, pots clanking, kids running, Cousin Marie who always hugged too hard, Uncle Jim who always drank too much, and my younger sister Diane, arms wide open and already misty-eyed. "There you are," she whispered. "There you are." 3 words that felt more like a benediction. I watched Adam as he navigated the crowd. He was cautious but present, polite smiles, a few quiet jokes. He helped carry a cooler in and made small talk about weather and traffic. And I realized, this wasn't just a gathering for him. It was a test. Could he be among family without feeling like an imposter? Could he belong without disappearing? That evening, we all gathered for dinner on the wraparound porch. Long tables, paper plates, someone's playlist looping old hits from the 90s. Adam sat next to me quietly, chewing through potato salad. Then Diane raised her glass. "I just want to say," she began, "that I'm grateful. This year we've all faced something. Loss, change, growth. And I want to honor the fact that we're still here." Everyone clapped. Then someone added, "Say something, Elaine." I laughed awkwardly. "Me?" They nodded. So I stood. And I told the truth. "I haven't always shown up," I said. "Not for family events, not for conversations, not even for myself." A few people tilted their heads. I continued. "But someone very close to me reminded me this year that being absent doesn't mean you're heartless. Sometimes it means you're in pain. And it's taken me a long time to stop hiding mine." I turned to Adam softly. "I'm learning how to show up. And I hope it's not too late." There was a beat of silence, and then a smattering of applause. Not because it was a great speech, but because it was honest. And in that family, honesty was rarer than gold. Later, I found Adam sitting by the fire pit alone. "Too much?" I asked. He smirked. "No. It was perfect." "You okay?" He poked at a log with a stick, then said, "I didn't realize how much I missed this. Not them necessarily, but the idea of family." "What do you mean, I mean?" "People who know your old stories, who remember when you lost your front tooth or puked at the state fair. Even if they annoy the hell out of you, they see you." I nodded. He looked at me. "I want more of this." And in that moment, I felt it. The past no longer held his throat in its fist. He was free to want, to hope, to build. And I, his mother, was finally someone safe to do that beside. The next day, he played soccer with the little kids and helped Diane's husband fix a broken screen door. I watched from the porch, sipping tea, and for the first time in years, I felt light. Not because everything was perfect, but because the people we were becoming were people we could finally live with. Before we left, Diane pulled me aside. "I don't know what changed," she whispered, "but keep doing it." I smiled. "We're learning to speak the truth." She hugged me. "It suits you." Driving home, Adam said we should host the next one. I nearly swerved off the road. "You want to host a family reunion?" He laughed. "Why not? Maybe our story can be the beginning of someone else's." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I smiled. "Let's do it." The moment came not with drama, but with dust. I was on my knees reaching beneath the hallway cabinet for a dropped clothespin when I found an old photo instead, one that had slipped behind the drawer years ago. It was of me and Adam at his 3rd birthday party. His face was smeared with frosting, his hand clutched in mine. I looked, younger, yes, but also frightened, tight, tired. I sat down right there on the floor, back against the cabinet photo, trembling in my hands. And for the first time in my life, I whispered the words out loud, "I forgive you." Not to him, to myself. You don't just arrive at forgiveness. You bleed your way toward it. I had bled in silence for years through lonely dinners, missed calls, unspoken disappointments, and the crushing guilt that maybe I had ruined my son without meaning to. But that photo was a key, a crack in the armor, a doorway I hadn't dared to walk through. Because here's the truth. No one likes to admit motherhood is not sainthood. It's decisions made in exhaustion. It's tempers lost at midnight. It's sandwiches cut the wrong way and being blamed for the divorce and forgetting a costume for school day. It's pretending you're okay when you're falling apart. And I had done all of it. Sometimes well, sometimes horribly, but always with love. That has to count for something, doesn't it? I stayed on that floor for hours. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old wood. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn redemption from a courtroom that only existed in my head. And all the times I'd replayed moments with Adam, his anger, his silence the day he walked out and didn't return for 2 years, and asked myself, what did I do wrong? But now I asked something new. What did I do right? I remembered the night he had a fever of 104, and I stayed up with a cold compress and stories whispered in the dark. I remembered making his favorite meal, grilled cheese with way too much butter, after every heartbreak. I remembered how I clapped louder than anyone at his 8th grade play, even when he only had 2 lines. And I remembered the letters I wrote but never sent. The ones where I told him he was enough, that I was sorry, that I loved him anyway. Maybe I hadn't been perfect, but I'd been there. I'd stayed. Later that night, I lit a candle in the living room, not out of ritual, but as an offering to myself. I sat with that photo again. I held it against my chest, and I said every apology I needed to hear. I'm sorry you didn't have help. I'm sorry no one saw how scared you were. I'm sorry you were too busy surviving to grieve. I'm sorry you thought silence meant strength. Then I said every word I needed to believe. You did your best. You didn't ruin him. You are allowed to heal. You are worthy of peace. The next morning, I called Adam. He answered quickly. Hi, I said. My voice wobbled. Hey. You okay, I think? I think I'm finally learning how to forgive myself. There was silence on the line, a kind one. Then he said, took you long enough. I laughed. Cried too. I thought it meant letting myself off the hook. It doesn't, he replied. It just means you stop swinging. He came by that afternoon. We didn't talk about the photo. We didn't have to. Instead, we sat on the porch, drank tea, and talked about dumb things: the neighbor's barking dog, the price of strawberries, a rerun of a cooking show. And I realized forgiveness didn't have to be loud. It could be warm. It could be quiet. It could feel like your son peeling an orange and offering you half without a word. That night, I wrote a letter to myself. Not to be mailed, just to be kept. Dear Elaine, you are not your worst moments. You are not the fights, the slammed doors, the forgotten birthdays, or the nights you cried into your pillow. You are the love that came before the pain. You are the effort behind the mistakes. You are the mother who stayed. You do not owe the world perfection. You do not owe your child sainthood. You only owe yourself the truth. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be human. You are allowed to forgive yourself. And it's time. Love you. I sealed it in an envelope and placed it on my nightstand. Every morning since I've woken up, looked at that envelope and reminded myself, the past doesn't need to vanish to lose its power. It just needs to be seen and loved anyway. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering and choosing to love what you remember anyway. It started with a box I wasn't ready to open. The attic was colder than I remembered, the kind of cold that made your joints ache and your breath catch. Dust hung in the light like old secrets swirling each time I shifted something. I was supposed to be clearing it out. A symbolic act, really. A gesture toward healing. But we all know healing doesn't come in organized cardboard. It comes with surprises. With forgotten pieces of a person you once were. I found the notebook in a stack labeled Adam, School Years. It was wedged between an old soccer trophy and a math workbook with doodles on every margin. Black faux leather frayed at the spine corners bent. Something about it tugged at me. I flipped it open. Pages and pages of scribbled thoughts, lyrics, half-drawn faces, confessions of someone trying to shape himself in silence. And then tucked in the very back pocket, folded into a perfect square A letter. Yellow paper. My name on the front. Mom. It was his handwriting. A little slanted. Bold in places where emotion must have pressed the pen harder. I stared at it for a full minute, then sat down on the dusty floor and unfolded it. Dear Mom, if you're reading this, then either I finally grew the spine to give it to you, or you found it while snooping. Which, let's be honest, you always were good at. Either way, it's yours now. I've tried to write this a dozen times. I don't know how to say all this without sounding like a cliché, or worse, like I'm blaming you all over again. Because that's what I've done for years, isn't it? Blamed you. I blamed you when I didn't get into the college I wanted. I blamed you when Dad didn't come to my graduation. I blamed you when I didn't know who I was at 23 when rent was due, and I hated my job, and my life, and myself. I made you the villain, because it was easier than facing the truth. The truth is, you scared me. Not in the way people think of when they hear scared. You never hit me. You never screamed. But you disappeared in front of me. Every time life got heavy, you'd armor up and go silent. That silence was loud in a house with just two people. I filled in the blanks with my worst fears. And worse, I thought your silence meant I had to do the same. So I became cold, distant. I punished you with absence because I didn't know how to scream, "I need you." Do you remember that night after sophomore year, when I came home drunk and broke the glass coffee table? You said nothing. Just picked up the shards, wrapped your hand in a towel, and told me to go to bed. You didn't even look at me. I wanted you to yell. I wanted consequences. Instead, I got your back turned, and that hurt more than anything. But I understand now. You were tired. You were always tired. Of holding up the world alone. Of pretending to be stronger than you felt. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I get it. I didn't then. But I do now. You were 29 when you had me. Alone, broke, scared out of your mind. And still, you made it work. I used to hate that you never came to soccer games. Now I understand you were taking on an extra shift to afford my cleats. I used to think you didn't care that my friends had two parents at every school play. Now I know you were fighting to be both roles every single damn day. I'm sorry I didn't see you. Really see you. I need you to know something else. I didn't run away from home because of you. I ran away from the version of me I thought I had to be around you. The good son. The one who never asks for help. The one who gets straight A's and doesn't cry and keeps all the hard questions buried. But the truth is, I had questions. I had pain. And I didn't know how to give it a voice. So I left. And you know what haunts me? That you didn't come after me. Not with words. Not with a fight. You let me go. I used to think that meant you didn't care. Now I know it meant you respected me enough to let me crash on my own terms. You believed I'd find my way back. That takes love. The deep kind. The terrifying kind. The kind that doesn't demand proof. I guess this letter is my proof. That I came back. That I want back in. Not as a son trying to fix everything. As a man trying to rebuild something new with you. So here's what I hope. I hope we can talk. About the hard years. About Dad. About fear. About the days we both pretended everything was fine while it wasn't. I hope we can laugh again. Really laugh. Like we used to when I was little and we made pancakes with chocolate chips and danced in socks on the tile. I hope we both find a way to stop living in apology. Because you don't owe me perfect. You only owe me you. And I'm ready to show you me too. I love you. Even when I couldn't say it. Always. Adam. I didn't realize I'd been crying until a drop fell onto the paper smearing the word always. I pressed it to my chest, curled up on that attic floor, and let the waves hit. Not grief, not guilt, just release. I read it 3 more times that day, and once more at night when the house was quiet and the walls didn't echo anymore. I thought about every moment I thought I'd lost him, and how this letter had reached through all those lost years and touched my heart like he was holding it in his hands. The next morning, I made breakfast, eggs, toast, fruit, the works. When Adam arrived to help me move some boxes, I handed him a cup of coffee and sat across from him. He looked at me curious. I smiled and said I found something in the attic. He paused. Yeah, I didn't say what. I didn't need to. Instead, I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. Thank you, I whispered. He didn't ask why, but his eyes said he knew, and when he squeezed my hand back, I knew too. We didn't need to open the letter in that moment, because the act of loving someone through years of silence sometimes speaks louder than any page ever could. Later that night, as we boxed up old toys and clothes, he said I was afraid you'd be mad. For what? For writing all that and hiding it. I smiled. I think you were just waiting until I could handle the truth. He nodded. Still, it scared me. Love always does. That night, after he left, I put the letter in my keepsake drawer. Not to hide it, to honor it, to remind myself that healing doesn't always come in conversations. Sometimes it comes in unread notes and second chances, and the courage to let the truth finally be heard. There's a part of town Adam never really knew, not because I hid it from him, but because it was the part of myself I never let anyone see. The corner of Ivy Street and Columbus Avenue, a battered red brick building tucked between a closed-down laundromat and a Vietnamese sandwich shop that always smelled like cilantro and comfort. From the outside, it looked like nothing, but to me, it was the cave where I learned to breathe again after I thought I'd drown. I want to take you somewhere, I told Adam over the phone one morning. He paused. Where? It's a little bit of my past, I said, but it won't bite. His silence stretched just long enough for me to worry he'd say no. Then, okay, should I drive? He picked me up that afternoon, the same old nervous energy pulsing between us that we'd been learning to live with. The letter had softened things, yes, but even shared truths don't erase years of carefully built distance. They just poke holes in it like sunlight through blinds. I held my bag close to my lap as he drove. He glanced at me a few times. You're not going to make me hike through woods or something, are you? He asked with a crooked smile. I smiled back. Worse. Memory lane. We parked in front of the red brick building. He looked up at it. This used to be... What, an apartment? I shook my head. Women's shelter. 1993. His eyebrows rose. You lived here for 8 months? I said, my voice steadier than I expected. When I found out I was pregnant with you and had no job, no home, no plan, just a car with 2 bald tires and a social worker who didn't blink when I cried. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I opened the passenger door. Come on, let me show you where your mother learned how to survive. The front door creaked. The building wasn't abandoned. It had been repurposed into a community arts center, but the bones were still the same. Faded tile, low ceilings, the faint scent of stale paper and warm dust. I walked slowly through the halls. This room, I said, pointing to one with sun-yellow walls and a sagging couch. This is where I held you for the first time after they brought me back from the hospital. Adam's eyes followed every corner like he was piecing together a map. And this one, I nodded toward another, is where I nearly gave you up. He stopped walking. What, I turned to face him. I was 29. I had $20. I didn't know how to love anything without hurting it. And for a week, I thought the best thing I could do for you was not be your mother. I let the words hang. He swallowed hard. Why didn't you? Because I whispered one of the women here handed me a Polaroid camera, told me to take a picture of you sleeping. She said, if you can look at this and still walk away, I'll help you do it. I took the photo. You had one arm flung above your head like a tiny emperor. I couldn't walk away. We stood in silence for a moment. Then Adam said very softly, thank you for staying. That cracked something in me, because all those years I thought I failed him. Those words told me he saw the fight. Even if late, we sat on the old couch. I told him things I'd never said out loud about the night I drove in the rain for hours because I couldn't bear to face the shelter's silence. About how the kindness of strangers kept me fed. About how terrified I was every minute of every day. And then he asked, why now? Why bring you here? He nodded. I looked at him. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means inviting someone into the place you used to hide your pain and letting them help carry it. He put his hand on mine. I'm sorry I blamed you, he said. I didn't know what you carried. I didn't let you. I said. I was afraid that if you saw me weak, you'd never respect me. He shook his head. Turns out the opposite's true. We left the shelter just before sunset. As we stepped out into the amber light, he turned to me. I don't want to carry my anger anymore, he said. I want to carry this, the whole story, even the broken parts. That was the first time I saw it in his eyes. Not just love, but understanding. We got in the car. He didn't drive right away, just sat there staring out the windshield. Then he said, do you think if I had known this earlier, we would have been different? I took a long breath. Maybe. Or maybe we needed the time apart to realize what we needed from each other. He nodded. I'm glad you brought me here. I'm glad you came. As we drove home, I felt something uncoil inside me. Not closure. Something better. Connection. And the quiet certainty that no matter how far we'd drifted, we had found a way back. It started with a name Adam found in a drawer. An old envelope. Postmarked but never opened. My handwriting on the front, returned to sender. Inside a letter I had written over 25 years ago, addressed to Michael Talbot. Adam held it between his fingers like it might vanish. Who is this? I didn't answer right away. I sat down at the table, heart slow and thunderous. My father, he asked. I nodded. I hadn't spoken his name aloud in more than a decade. I'd buried it alongside everything else I thought was better left untouched. Michael Talbot was a story I never wanted to finish reading. A man who made promises in the moonlight and disappeared by morning. But Adam wanted to meet him. Not because he needed a father, because he needed the truth. We found him 2 towns over, living in a weathered cottage near a lake. He was listed under a different last name, his mother's. Maybe hiding or maybe just surviving, same as me. Adam reached out first. A single message. No anger, no expectation. Just this. I think I'm your son. Would you be willing to talk? Michael replied in 2 hours. Yes. We drove there on a Wednesday. The road curled along the lake, the sky bruised with clouds. Adam kept tapping his fingers on the wheel. Nervous energy. He wasn't looking for reconciliation. He said that. He wasn't hoping for hugs or closure. He just wanted to see the man who vanished, to understand what kind of shadow had shaped his life. The cottage was quiet. A gray dog barked once from the porch and then went still. Michael answered the door slowly. He looked older than I remembered, thinner with sunspots on his cheeks and a stooped posture. But his eyes, they were the same. Those soft, indecisive blue eyes. They landed on me then, on Adam, and widened. We stood there for a beat too long. Then he said, "You look just like I did at that age." Adam didn't smile, but he didn't flinch either. "Can we come in?" he asked. Michael nodded. The inside smelled like cedar and old coffee. A single lamp lit the room. No photos, no clutter. I sat in a corner chair. Adam sat on the couch, hands folded. Michael perched on the edge of a rocking chair as if ready to bolt. The silence was bone deep. Then Adam spoke. "Why did you leave?" Michael blinked. "Because I was a coward," he said. The honesty stunned me. I was 24. I thought I'd be a good father. I told myself I would. And then I saw the bills, the responsibility, the weight of it all. And I ran. Adam nodded, absorbing it like glass absorbing heat. "Do you ever think about her?" Michael looked at me, guilt and softness vying for space on his face. "Every damn day." "Then why didn't you come back?" He inhaled sharply. "Because I thought you both were better off without me." My voice came out hoarse. "We weren't." I didn't mean for it to sound cruel. Just true. There were nights I begged the universe for 1 ounce of help. One call. One visit. One crumb of co-parenting. But the silence always answered first. Adam looked between us. "I needed a story," he said. "Not even a good one. Just something. You left a black hole where a person should have been." Michael's eyes welled. "I can't fix it," he whispered. "I know," Adam replied. "But I'm not here for that. I just wanted to hear you say it." They stared at each other. And for a second, I saw time collapse. The man who walked away. The boy who grew up in his absence. And the woman who held the middle ground like a bridge built from splinters. Michael stood up, walked to a bookshelf and returned with a photo, one I had never seen. Me pregnant. Probably 8 months. Sitting on a park bench. He must have taken it when I wasn't looking. "I kept this," he said. "It reminded me of who I failed." I took the photo. And for once, instead of rage, I felt release. Not forgiveness, but relief. That I was seen, even if only from afar. Adam stood. "I'm not asking for a relationship," he said. "But I am asking you to be honest with yourself. If you ever want to know me now, you'll have to earn it." Michael nodded slowly. "I'd like that chance." We left shortly after. As we drove away, neither of us spoke for miles. Finally, Adam whispered, "That didn't fix anything." "No," I said, but it broke the silence. Later that night, as we sat on the back porch drinking tea, Adam asked, "Do you regret being with him?" I thought about it, and then said, "No, because from all that mess I got you." He smiled. "For what it's worth," he said, "you were the only parent I ever needed." And in that moment, I knew the past couldn't be undone, but it could be understood. And sometimes that's all the healing we need. It was raining when I told him. Not a storm, not a downpour, just a soft, persistent tapping on the windows like the sky was gently insisting we pay attention. I made us tea. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, tired from the weak hoodie sleeves pushed up to his elbows, fingers curled around a chipped mug that had survived 3 different kitchens and countless years. I looked at him, not as the boy I raised, not as the man who blamed me, not even as the person who'd cracked open my past in the last few weeks. I looked at him as someone I needed to tell the truth to. All of it. "There's something I want to say," I began. He met my eyes. Quiet, steady. And so I started. "I didn't grow up thinking I'd be a mother." His eyebrows twitched just slightly. "I didn't dream of it. I didn't plan for it. I wasn't one of those girls who picked baby names in middle school or imagined what their wedding dress would look like. I wasn't soft. I was scared. All the time. Of the world. Of myself. Of being invisible. And too visible all at once." I paused, gathering the words in my chest like breath. "But then I got pregnant. With you. And for the first time, I had to stop running." He said nothing. Just listened. I continued, voice low and even. "You were not the mistake people assumed you were. You were the reason I learned how to hold on when all I wanted was to disappear." He blinked. Slowly. His fingers tightened slightly around the mug. I failed you in ways I couldn't admit to myself, I said. Not because I didn't love you, but because I thought love had to look like strength, and I thought strength meant silence. I was wrong. His throat moved, but he still didn't interrupt. I watched you struggle, and I blamed myself for not being softer, for not being present, for not knowing how to be your anchor when I was still trying not to drown. He spoke then, barely above a whisper. Why didn't you ever tell me my eyes stung? Because I thought being honest would make me look like a failure, and I wanted so badly for you to believe I had it all under control. He looked down. I didn't need you to be perfect, Mom. I just needed you to be there. I know. And I needed you to tell me it was okay to be lost. My breath caught. I didn't know how I said. No one ever told me that either. We sat with it, the quiet weight of truth. And then he said something that caught me off guard. You know, there were nights I used to wish I had a different mom. I nodded slowly. I used to wish I had a different life, I said. That made him laugh, a dry, honest sound. And now he asked. Now I said I wouldn't trade it. Not even the worst parts. Because every scar I carry has your name etched into it. And somehow that doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like a map. A map to who we are, to how we found our way back. He looked away, wiping at one eye like it was an itch. Then he whispered, I'm glad we did. Me too. The rain kept falling, steady and soft. We talked until midnight. Not all of it was heavy. Some of it was warm, old memories, jokes we'd forgotten the night he peed on the Christmas tree as a toddler, and I cried from laughing. And some of it was raw. I told him about the abortion I nearly had before I found out he was already too far along. He told me about the panic attack he hid during his senior year. I confessed to wanting to run away once when he was 6. He admitted he used to imagine his real mom was someone rich and perfect and far away. We laughed, we cried, we said it all. And then, around 1 a.m., as we were rinsing our cups and folding the evening back into silence, he turned to me. You know what scares me now? What, that I'll mess up with my own kids the way we messed up. I dried my hands, turned to him. You will, I said gently, because love isn't clean. But if you stay and if you keep showing up, and if you own the truth, your kids will forgive you more than you ever forgive yourself. He stared at me, and then he nodded. Later, I watched him pull out of the driveway, headlights cutting through the drizzle. He waved once from the driver's side. I waved back, and stood in the doorway until the night swallowed him. Now, weeks later, I still think about that conversation, the one I should have had years ago, the one that changed everything. I used to think that motherhood was about control, but it's not. It's about surrender. Surrendering the fantasy, the timeline, the idea that love is supposed to be quiet and easy, and it's about returning over and over to the people you love, even when it hurts. So here's what I've learned. Your children will break your heart. You will break theirs. But if you're honest, really honest, there's still time to build something beautiful out of the pieces. Adam and I aren't perfect, but we are real, and that more than anything feels like redemption. Thank you for listening to our story. If you've ever carried silence in your family, if there are things you've left unsaid, maybe it's time. Maybe you don't need a perfect moment, just a real one. And if this story meant something to you, I hope you'll share your own. Subscribe to Grace's Truth for more. We tell the hard stories so you don't have to carry yours alone.